Well, welcome everyone to this evening's curriculum committee meeting. Please let the record show that all members of the committee are present. Looking forward to tonight's conversation about the pre-K program. Sue, thanks for being here.
Of course.
The first order of business is to attend to approving the meeting minutes, which I don't have a link to them in the agenda, but and I wasn't here for that meeting, so I'm going to abstain. Once we have a link on that.
Lindsay, do you have those from the last meeting? Are you there, Lindsay?
I muted myself. Sorry. Yes, I do. I had linked them to board docs, but I will grab them right now and bring them forth.
Oh.
Thank you, Lindsay. And then once you do that, Javier is trying to get into this meeting as well. Actually, while you're doing that, I'll send him the link.
We have minutes in board docs. Is that what you meant, Adam?
Yep. Sorry, I was working out of the Google Doc. The fatal flaw of working in two platforms. So if you have the minutes there, we can move to pass the minutes unless doubted. And I look to you and Mickey on that.
So moved.
Yes, great. And that's that. So,
okay.
Leah, over to you.
Okay, great. And Lindsay, can you send Javier a link to this meeting, please? He wants to get in, and I guess I only have my personalized link. Is that okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Here's a little slow.
Oh, okay. I'll let him know. Lindsay Sunday. Okay. Great. Well, so I'm really excited to spend our meeting this evening talking about the Portland Public Pre-K. Big appreciation to Sue, who's here. This is her very last act-ish. As our pre-K director before she heads out on leave. She actually extended her last day so that she could be with us this evening to make sure folks had the opportunity to really hear from the person who's got the depth of knowledge and experience and expertise around what's happening with Portland Public Pre-K. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. I did not post it on board docs because it was more of like a discussion piece that we were just finishing up until minutes ago, but we will absolutely make it available and have it posted after this meeting. So let me get myself screen sharing.
Malia, can I just interrupt for a sec?
Absolutely.
Are you expecting Matt to be joining this too? Would he need a link?
Yeah, but Lindsay, was the, how did you all get your link? Was it on board docs? Yeah. Maybe, Sue, you could email Matt's email address to Lindsay and she could send it to him as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because it's an active session, it's not allowing me to actually add people in the platform. So I'll have to email the link and then update them to your panel.
Yeah. That sounds perfect, Lindsay. Thank you. Awesome. And then is everyone viewing my screen now? Okay, thanks, Mickey. Great. So our objectives tonight are to first just provide you all with an update on our progress towards the 5-year goals that were outlined in the resolution. It's been a minute since we've talked about where we're at with pre-K, so we're excited to just do a little bit of updating around what's been happening and where we stand vis-a-vis our long-term goals of Portland Public Pre-K. In doing that, our hope is to also illuminate some of the challenges and barriers we face as it pertains to full implementation of what's called for in the resolution. And then ultimately, we want to be able to answer some questions and have some discussion about where we're at and where we're headed next with the committee this evening. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish in the next bit of time. Any questions on that before we get rolling? Okay. As far as our flow, give a little bit of quick regrounding context. Then we'll look at where we're at with current enrollment, talk about our expansion next steps, and then get into a little bit of update as to where we're at with our barrier removal work around transportation and before and after care. And then we have some other, I think, critical updates as it pertains to our lottery, our mixed delivery model, having all educators on the teacher contract, as well as where we're at with program quality. And then we'll finish with questions and discussion. Each of these is a little section. So I think maybe we can talk through the section. I'll let you know kind of when we're at a good pause point to do some questions. And then if you're asking questions that are coming up, I'll just kind of manage us to stay within the section just from an efficiency perspective, if that works for the committee. Okay, cool. Awesome. So just in terms of context, this is one piece of research. There are many, and we've looked at this one before, so that's why we just kind of pulled it back to have more of a recall. But I think this particular group of folks is well aware of the fact that the why behind this work is because it is a significant equity lever in terms of creating more of a level playing field for all of our students. So we know that experience in a high quality pre-K has really positive outcomes, and that the impact on students is especially significant for students who are growing up in poverty. And so our why behind this is that this is a very clear and concrete move we can make that supports our goals of making our institution work for all of our students so that they can all reach their goals. In terms of the resolution, I think not all of you, but I know Roberto, I think Mickey were around for back in the day when we were in the city council chambers. Thank you. Got my seltzer. Board meeting supply. I need at least like three seltzers. And apparently I trained him well. As in, give me a seltzer or else. No, I'm just kidding. So our goals at the time, these are them summarized, but basically it was about increasing access so that everybody had the opportunity to have a high quality pre-K experience. And so we set out to add 140 new seats. We came to this number based on work with Starting Strong and the Data Innovation Project. We were trying to understand what was the experience of families in the community at that point, who was being underserved, where was that happening? And ultimately, we went with this 140 target because that would mean we'd have enough seats to serve students eligible for free and reduced lunch and continue to have the distribution of seats reflect the district demographics of 55% low income, 45% not low income. And so what that would mean from the launch of that resolution is that we'd be adding 2 classrooms a year and then 1 in the last year for 5 years consecutively. Our resolution also called for the removal of barriers. At the time, we did, like I mentioned, this work with the Data Innovation Project, where we had surveys and focus groups, and it was very clear that many families could not access our public pre-K because we weren't providing transportation and we didn't have before and after care. And so those things were significant enough barriers that even if given the opportunity, families couldn't take advantage of it. And so we said we wanted to address those barriers to create meaningful access for all families. And then we had components of the resolution that called on us to make sure that the actual program was high quality. So that's just a little bit of a recall in terms of what we were setting out to do. And so now I want to talk through where we are with our current state in terms of seats and enrollment. And as we go, I told Sue, I will be kind of like your MC, if you will. So I'll tee a lot of this up, but Sue has the depth of knowledge and expertise. So Sue will chime in and certainly probably be able to answer the bulk of your questions. And I'm just noticing that Katie, Matt, and I believe Javier have joined us. So welcome to all of you. We're just kind of setting the table. So in terms of where we stand right now, we have 221 seats available on the mainland, and then the peaks number flexes depending on need out there. So currently we have 6, so 227 total seats. And underneath that, you see the expansion trajectory we've been on for the last few years. And so per the resolution, we've continued to open 2 classrooms per year, with one kind of important highlight, which was in 2020-21. We actually added 3 classes. So from like a staff capacity perspective, it was the work of adding 3, but the net effect in terms of our bottom line was still just 2 classrooms, because that was the year that we lost the partnership with the Head Start program, which was specifically because of our board's desire to have all teachers and ed techs on our contract, which was not something that they were able or willing to do. So we lost a partner and gained 3. So we still are kind of netting out where we had intended to go over the 2 year, with 2 classrooms per year. Anything to add to that, Sue, before I keep going?
I think I'll just say, the loss of the Opportunity Alliance was 1 classroom, but that doesn't mean that there might have been further opportunity to partner, right? Because they have multiple locations in the city. And so, when I came into this role, we had 1 partnership for Reiki area students with the Opportunity Alliance, but it's not as if they don't serve other 4-year-olds. So I just want to underscore that loss of that Head Start partnership, it's not just a loss of 1 classroom, but it's also a loss of potentially more than 1 classroom, and also all of the wraparound services and affordances that Head Start comes with, right? So many other districts do partner with Head Start, and it's just unfortunate that we cannot under our current circumstances.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question for the first slide. Just a quick refreshing. When we have the 96 new seats added since the resolution, and I see the 112 total. So what's the 112 coming from? With the
yeah. So the 112 means that we actually added in 2020, 2021, if you add 16 to 32, we actually, originally this slide said added 48 seats, because we did add 48 seats, but we lost the seats through Head Start.
Okay.
So we've added 112, but the net effect to the bottom line is that we've added 96 in this period of time. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. And so then this gives you a little bit of perspective on the lottery. We had the lottery that happened in February, opened up on the 8th. And for that initial wave, we had 245 of families apply. And of the families that applied, 48% identified as low income and 52% applied as not low income. And of those who applied, 70% were English only speaking families and 30% were multilingual. And we made 227 initial offers for placement in early March, which did include the PEAKS classroom, and 92% of the applicants that applied in that first wave were offered a placement in a PreK classroom. And so do you want to give a little bit of context around, well, why not 100? If we had the seats for or just talk about a little bit behind the 92.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the complexities of the lottery is that people apply. And this year in particular, and we'll talk about it in a moment, people applied not knowing whether we would have transportation or before and after school. And so I think we have applicants, and then we have people moving out of Portland. We have people who change their minds. We have people who are waiting to hear if their child got into a different program, potentially a private program that they have to apply to and get accepted to. So it's never a perfect 100% of anything. And it's constantly churning, as you'll see in the next couple of slides. And I should just give a shout out to Dina Louie, who's the assistant to pre-K programs, because she did all of this data collection and analysis, which is a huge amount of work as a part-time person. So she's not here with us this evening. She had a family medical incident to deal with, but just shout out to Dina for getting us this data, because this is new for me since my tenure in just a little over 2 years, to have someone who could furnish this kind of data, which is really exciting for us in terms of moving forward with some informed decision-making data.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Mm-hmm. And ditto on the shout out. So just to kind of keep us moving to what Sue was alluding to. So in terms of how this nets out with where we're at right now with enrollment, we had 209 students enrolled by July 1, which was a key date for us because that enabled early screening, which is helpful in and important to set students up for success. And as of today, we have 224 students enrolled and attending a pre-K program. Actually, let me say, as of 9/28, and as Sue and Dina are quick to tell me, it's a moving target. So, it's been changing day by day as we land the final slots that have been open. And so 39% of the students that are enrolled in our Portland pre-K identify as students who are multilingual. And so they've engaged with our multilingual specialists in that process. And then we have a little bit of information about students being placed in and out of home neighborhoods. So just over a third of our pre-K students were placed out of their home neighborhoods. And of that group, so not of the total, but of that approximately third of the students who had an out of home or out of neighborhood placement, 45% of them identify as low income, and 69% were placed at schools that had different start and end times than their home school. And that's something we're tracking and looking at, because for families that have 2 students in our system, that has a big implication in terms of their life logistics.
And I'll just chime in and say it has an implication if they have the same start time, but they're in 2 different locations. And it has an implication if they have different start and end times in 2 different locations. So it's complex no matter what way you slice it, really, unless both the pre-K student and the older sibling are in the same building, which can't happen everywhere for multiple reasons that we'll share shortly.
Yeah.
So real quick, was that a reason also why we have the 92%? Did any parents decide to not enroll because of that issue?
We have data on families, all the reasons why families decided not to enroll. One of the reasons for refusal, and again, this is a huge credit to Dina and kind of the systems we worked on with school secretaries, multilingual, to capture reason for refusal of any slot. And so there are multiple reasons. Some of them are that it's just not my preferred location, but not necessarily because of different start and end time. So we didn't ask that level of refined detail, but we certainly had families who declined a slot saying they wanted X school, and that's the only school they wanted.
It might make sense for us to just do the next 2 slides and then take questions, because that is on the next 2 slides. Is that okay? Or did you have a specific just clarification on this data, Adam?
I have a question about the 87 children that are part of the multilingual community. Is it good to ask now or hold?
I think that's okay, because you're not asking like a deeper question, which we get to well, go ahead and ask and we'll let you know if it's coming.
Okay. But my just question is, out of how many potential children does that represent that could be enrolled in pre-K? I understand the 39% as the total percentage of total enrolled, but I don't understand it as part of potential enrollees.
You mean of the 4-year-old census in Portland, or of the total applicants in Portland Public Schools?
Of the 4-year-old census.
I don't know.
Okay.
So one of the things that's a next step is, and Matt and Katie are here because this is via our partnership with Starting Strong, but we're doing a refresh on our data with DIP, the Data Innovation Project, and they're the ones that have helped us get that type of perspective, Adam. Specifically, we're working with them to understand essentially that question: where are we vis-a-vis the community, and how does that break down, and where does that break down, right? Because that's a huge question we have in terms of where we actually need expansion. And then ultimately, Starting Strong is going to help us figure out, and then are there actually potential community partners in the locations where we need them based on that data. So we had hoped to have that data for this meeting, and then realized that was a big hope, but not realistic, just given the timeline with them. It just takes a minute to get all that rolling, but we'll come back to you once we have the DIP data, and that will answer those types of questions. I mean, I think and I know Javier is here, I think we usually think about around 500 kids per incoming class, and Javier, correct me if I'm wrong, but just looking at our typical patterns. So you could maybe think of that as an approximation. But again, we're going to get that specific data through DIP.
And just to go further on that, Adam, I think your question is what percentage of the population, would normally be considered multilingual, and just to sort of, with Malia's point, about a quarter of our kids are English language learners, and about a third of our kids come from a home where a language other than English is spoken. So if in that context, 39% is a little bit higher than what we would expect in our general population.
Yeah.
That's all helpful. Thank you all.
Yeah. And so then just a couple more pieces of context here on enrollment. Here you're looking at some information about our wait list. So since the lottery window closed, we've had just about 100 more families who have applied for a seat. And of the families that applied after the window, 66% of them were multilingual and 69% of them are low income. And so that, later on, we're going to talk about that and the implication in terms of as we look at our lottery, it's families who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch and who are multilingual who tend to enter the lottery, significantly later in the process. And then there are 20 children currently on the wait list as of 9/28. I'm sure that's ticked down.
Much lower today.
What is it today? Do you have that?
I don't know. I would have to go on Infinite Campus. I don't know. But I want to say it's like 5 or 6.
Oh, great. So you see a lot of the students that were on the waiting list were low income and multilingual. And one factor there is that we're working with our intake team. And there's just right at the crunch at the start of school, a huge wait for getting through the intake process. And so there was, for about a week or two, a point at which they were trying to prioritize K through 5 just because they didn't have the capacity to run everybody through intake. And since pre-K isn't compulsory, but we've worked with them, and that's one of the areas that we've identified that needs, strengthening and I'll leave it at that, strengthening, because that's a known issue. And they're going to have that bottleneck every year.
And I will say, I'll just add, it's a little bit exacerbated by the fact that multilingual typically closed during August, right? And so multilingual staff are in a different place now, and whether or not that will continue next August will yet to be seen. But definitely, I'll just chime in, as the advocate for pre-K, the deprioritization of pre-K incoming through multilingual definitely had families waiting, knowing that they had a slot, but having to wait for quite a while to get through intake to be able to start and not start on time. So to whatever efforts we can make to change that moving forward, that would really be better for everyone, because imagine classrooms where you're trying to build your classroom community in the first couple of weeks of school and students are arriving, piecemeal for the first several weeks of school. It's not ideal for anyone.
Can I ask a question about that, Sue? Because you said the deprioritization. So did they deliberately deprioritize pre-kindergarten, or they just had a certain order of families that they were taking?
No, they definitely deprioritized kindergarten because pre-K is not compulsory. And there was, again, we have so many kids that come through intake after the lottery happens. And so trying really hard to get as many through multilingual intake in the spring before summer comes. And that we know that all of the new incoming multilingual students pre-K through grade 12 is a big burden and impact to the multilingual department. And so what happened was, once there was a critical mass of intake that needed to be done, both in the summer and once people first got back, multilingual staff first got back after August, pre-K was deprioritized. So we did truly have families who had gotten a slot, knew they had a slot, but had to wait until their child could go through multilingual. So it was a problem. And to Malia's point, once we surfaced it, they were very responsive and did everything they could to get pre-K in and through and starting. So I feel like there was a level of receptivity, but I also think it's connected to the recommendation to hire more multilingual staff to be proactively planning for the additional pre-K seats, right? So as we expand every year, there's going to be more need for multilingual intake for pre-K.
I have a quick question here for the multilingual. There is an issue for them no coming back in August? Because if I do remember, I think in the budget here with the multilingual, I think, do we have something to cover the need? I mean, what we need to bring them a little earlier on the school during August, so to go over all the necessary need, like the pre-K and everything else we need. Do we have that?
I'm questioning whether that is accurate that they weren't here in August, because we specifically added them in the budget this year to be full-time staff. So I'm somewhat puzzled by that.
So I might be incorrect. And if I am incorrect, then I would say the problem is even bigger, because if all the full staff was there and yet pre-K couldn't get through multilingual in time to start on time for school, there's still an issue, right? And again, because we're lotterying slots, every year the lottery could be different in terms of percentage of multilingual families. But if we know that we're going to, or we intend to add 2 more classrooms next year, in theory, the burden gets bigger for multilingual intake every year as we expand.
Yeah, I get you, Sue, but I kind of little wonder why we have 99 families after the lottery has closed. There is a reason why they didn't get the information on time, or what's the issue? Because that number is kind of a little high when I see compared to the 87 from the previous slide who were able to get to the timing set. So
right, and I will say that's the power of this data. So we did make a lot of improvements around outreach for multilingual families, but still this data seems to show that we're not reaching people or giving people enough time to register for the lottery, right? So this is why I'm really excited to have the data to inform some decisions moving forward.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you.
And I would totally agree with Sue's point about the data. And I think this has been historically true that in particular, we've tracked low-income families tend to apply later. And that came up, I think, in DIP as well. So I think Matt and Katie are here. That would be good to see we did some root cause analysis in the DIP data to just understand or pressure test that theory that sometimes, families, sometimes it could be about not knowing, not having enough time, and or just not having plans that far in advance in terms of having your plan in February for the following September.
I do think another piece of data that would be worth looking at is how many newcomer families do we have enrolled in pre-K? Because if newcomer families are arriving on a fairly ongoing basis, that could be another reason why they're late to apply, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to keep us rolling because we have a lot more data and information to get through. So let me just finish this section, pause, see if there's anything else here, and then make sure we can get to the next stages as well. But this is a question I think, Mickey, you were asking earlier. So why did people decline seats? So we've made a total of 341 offers for a placement in the seats that we have. And 117 of the families that got an offer declined the seat. And so here again, to Sue's point about the data systems that Dina's created, we now actually have tracked data on some of the common root causes or reasons why people have declined seats. And so you can see here, it's sort of distributed fairly evenly between the need for before and after care, wanting a different location, moving out of Portland, some impact in terms of COVID this past year, and then the largest chunk being families that ended up going with a private program. And underneath that, you can see that there's a variety of reasons why families might have opted for the private program, including different or better hours for the family, the sort of baked in before and after care, both sort of the logistics of that and the pricing of that. And then also just this whole timing issue is complicated across the board because for families that are planning in February and do have resources, they're kind of balancing this issue of needing to make deposits in private programs in case they don't get the public seat. And so that plays into whether or not families ultimately are accepting seats when they're offered. So those are some of the kind of core reasons we see why families get offered a seat but wind up not taking it.
And if it's okay, I'd just like to highlight the moved or moving out of Portland, 15% of the declines. So that, has an impact to everything. It has an impact to all of the communications, the registration, potentially multilingual intake. So we have kids potentially that decline here, but we also have kids that enroll and then decline once they've been enrolled. And so that's just when you look at the 341 offers have been made in total for the 200 plus that we have enrolled, that's just a lot of additional time and legwork. Just want to name that, again, knowing that Dina is a 20-hour-a-week, one-person show of offering those slots and communicating all the things.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question here. So when exactly are we finding, what's the timing? Do we have a family? Let me rephrase that method. Is that what I want to figure out when are we finding out then the family are declining seats? Which periods? I mean, when they are rolled from the lottery and when we sorting the kids and going to the intake. So which period of the year then we really find out then family are declining those seats?
I mean, I think it happens ongoing. So some families, it's when we follow up after the initial lottery and offer them a seat, they'll decline. But I think Sue's point is that it's an ongoing process, which makes it quite laborious just from a capacity perspective to manage, because we're also trying to kind of, in this process, we're looking at the neighborhoods, the transportation, the demographic balance. So there's a lot of variables that are kind of behind the scenes as we try to figure all this out. But to answer your question directly, it happens continuously that families are declining and or changing their minds, which is why we're still, like Sue said, from when we pulled this data to now, we've even had, more placements happen.
And I will say, Mickey, we made a change for this past year. Whereas 2 years ago, we were sending a translated letter letting people know that they had gotten a lottery slot. This year, we had multilingual call directly so that families could ask questions and could accept or decline on the spot, right? As a form of cultural brokering and more language access. So, I did a kind of cheat sheet about what pre-K was so that multilingual parent community specialists had that in front of them so that when they called families and families had questions, they had the same information to share in an effort to expedite the acceptances or declines from multilingual families.
All right. Yeah. I love the cultural brokering. This is exactly what is helping the transition for better integration. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is the last slide I have here in enrollment. But so in terms of where that lands us as of today, the metric we're tracking in terms of our Portland Promise long-term goals is the % of students that come to kindergarten having attended a high-quality pre-K. And we actually don't have a precise data point on that right now. What we know is 77% of our kindergarten students this past year indicated that they attended a pre-K, just in general. And then we know that 40% of our kindergarten students attended a high quality program in Portland. What we don't know is the gap between the 77 and 40, how many of them attended what's considered high quality in another context. So when we get to a later part of the conversation, we're going to talk more about changes that are happening in the state with quality ratings. And this will come up a lot in our DIP work. So I don't want to get into all of that right now per se. But basically this is tricky because it's not like there's one set list and bam, you check off, they did this one, or this one. It changes, it evolves. The definition of high quality has changed, and families are coming to us not just in Portland, but within a broader area. So it's a pretty complex data point, but we're excited to have DIP looking at that with us again. But this is kind of what we know right now in terms of the data that we have. And so let me pause here. Next, where we're going is going to be in terms of expansion next steps. But before I go there, any other questions about where we're at in terms of the number of seats available in our current enrollment?
I just want to say that it's definitely helpful to see the data story behind this, and I've experienced firsthand as a parent of pre-K or some of the things, and I didn't know the reasoning behind it, particularly the kind of staggered start for a lot of students, and have seen our educators in the classroom do a beautiful job of keeping the ducklings together and invite new kids in and keeping it together, and I have a lot of love for what they're doing. And I'll say the 100 people, 99 people requesting after the deadline, I'll just say that planning is a privilege, and I just would want to hit that note more than the narrative of people applying late or after deadline or that sort of thing. There's a subtle difference there. And lastly, I'll say, and I don't want to get into my personal experience with the different schools and times, everybody's been really lovely and trying to make sure I understood as a parent what was going on. But I'll just say, if there's the opportunity to be part of a work group, a problem solving oriented work group, and looking into the process moving forward, I'm happy to do that as a parent and board member. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that second point in terms of planning as a privilege, both in the frame of like after the deadline. I hear that feedback. Also, when we look at, root causes, it's not, I think recruitment is part of it, but I don't think that's all of it. And I think that's connected to your point as well. I'm going to keep us rolling unless anyone else has a question or comment, just knowing we have quite a bit more.
Just real quick, Malia, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I can't see you. Oh, there you are. Yep.
So just want to, just to be sure, is it 224 seats that we have or 221?
Well, we have 221 mainland, and then right now we have 6 peaks.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And the peaks one changes. That's why
last year we had 1 pre-K student on peaks. So it just island demographics.
Yeah, I was there Saturday, by the way. Sue, just want to thank Sue for highlighting just that comparison. 341 offers that yielded 224 seats. That's 117 processes. That, like you said, that's a lot of capacity. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of work. So yeah, thank you. I think that really framed a really important point. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Roberto. Okay. So just briefly in terms of expansion next steps. So relative to the target we set in the resolution, we have to open 3 more classes to hit the target. So timeline wise, we're right on track with what we set out to do, which also is, I think, pretty incredible given the fact that we've been through COVID and tried to bring pre-K remote and hybrid. And while that was happening, we didn't miss a beat in terms of moving forward with the planned work in terms of expansion and transportation and those things. So I think that would have been incredible in a normal year, and to have stayed the course without any pause in the context that we've been in is tremendous. And, I think has worn on the team pretty significantly. So in terms of where we are, like I said, right on track. So we've got the 3 more classes. In that resolution, we talked about two classes per year and then 1 in the 5th year. So we'd be on track to potentially open 2 this year and then 1 next year. I've mentioned we're partnering with Starting Strong. Again, thanks to Katie and Matt for being here to better understand the needs. So both the amount and the locations, I think that location point is really critical, so that we're not just willy-nilly adding classes wherever they are, but that we're being strategic and intentional about meeting the community need. Right now, we don't have space in our schools. And so I think folks are aware of that. We're cognizant of the renovations that are underway, and just, aware of the fact that we could end up with space in a couple of years. So there's just some interesting implications for trying to recruit new community partners, if it would be our longer term desire to have classes in our buildings. And, so there's a whole set of considerations when we think about that. And then I had mentioned before the work we're doing with Starting Strong. They're helping us look at this kind of community assessment to understand the potential partners for expansion. The change to the quality rating system, Sue, Katie, and Matt can all speak probably in more detail about it, but I can tell you at the gist level, it used to be they had a particular number and you were looking at programs and they had to qualify for that. I don't think there's the same numeric target, but to become a Portland pre-K program, you have to ultimately be able to prove that you can meet Chapter 124 requirements. And so what's interesting about that is that in trying to find partners, there's a whole body of work to look at. It's not like we can go, okay, you three are fours, so we're going to come talk to you. But it's more like, could you get to this level in terms of meeting these requirements? So there's more nuance there in the process, which is why we're thrilled to have Starting Strong serve as a partner in helping us understand that. And then I think the other thing is that we do continue to feel committed to the mixed delivery model. But, in trying to pursue new partners, there are many challenges to overcome. I think the contract issue is significant for many partners. It is very challenging for them to manage both the sort of pay difference within their staff, but also all of the things that come with being on the contract. They don't have teachers on our contract, so they don't have the same parameters around the time and the planning time and, all the different things that our teachers are afforded through their contract. Food service is a challenge for many programs in terms of what they have on site. Not all of them have been serving food. Some of them have families just bring in their lunches. So that's an issue that we have to sort out. Working through the transportation complexities. And then for families, for the programs, they also think about the fact that they have families who are able to kind of pay fully direct to them. And so just this there's a business model factor at play here that's real, that our partners have to sort through in terms of deciding whether or not they want to become a partner in the public program. Sue, I'm sure you have things to add to that. So
yeah, I just, for particular context. So for example, this year we partnered with a new community partner called Children's Odyssey, and that was done really intentionally around their expertise in special education, thinking about the future of the Child Development Services 4-year-old programming coming into the public schools. But, nothing is perfect, right? So that particular program happens to be in the Talbot neighborhood. There's also a Head Start in the Talbot neighborhood. So right now our Talbot pre-Ks and Children's Odyssey are the hardest to fill, right? Because we may have an oversaturation of opportunity in that particular neighborhood. But again, the reason for partnering there was A, that they were willing in a pandemic to be a new partner, and B, that we're looking towards the future for special education programming potentially. I will say, the other thing, and Matt and Katie, please chime in, the quality rating system change is going from a four-point scale to a 5-point scale. And I think the discussion at the state level has been that in order to partner with public schools, programs that had to be a 4 in the past no longer have to be. And that's really to make it more viable to find community partners, because there's a recognition that a mixed delivery model is good, useful, and important, but also that not all public schools have space anyway, even if they wanted to, for 4-year-old programming. And so this, what Malia said about following Chapter 124 guidelines is a real thing. And so I don't really think it's that we would have to go and police them, but it would be a volition to be able to follow that. And many high quality programs already do most of that. One of the key pieces, I think, will be a curriculum question, right? Because Chapter 124 asks for an evidence-based curriculum. Many community programs use more homegrown curricula. So that's a discussion point for future. The food situation, the partners that we have right now, 4 of them, 3 always have served food, breakfast and lunch to their partners. That's just part of the MOU with our pre-K programs. But our newest partner at Children's Odyssey did not. So they kindly agreed to go through the entire food services training and provide meals just to our pre-K. So you think about that, the implication to a site director needing to go heat up lunches and et cetera, it's a burden, right? So super grateful and excited that they were willing to do that and recognize that we didn't want meals to be a barrier and an equity disabler for some families, but complex. So.
Thanks, Sue. So we're going to move into talking about transportation and before and after care, but any questions in terms of where we are with expansion? I'll sum up our annual goals this year at the end, and I'll touch on, what we're trying to do this coming year, but anything else here that brings up a question?
I just want to emphasize what you all have said, that you kept pace on this expansion during a pandemic, and that took a toll on you. And I hear that, and I see that, and I honor that, and I thank you for what you've done and know that it came at a cost.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for saying that, Adam. Okay. So now we want to talk a little bit about two key barriers that we set out to remove so that we were moving more toward true universal access, and that's providing transportation and before and after care. So in terms of transportation, this is just kind of an overview of where we are right now. So 61 of the 245 applicants within the lottery window said yes to transportation. And ultimately, we initially offered transportation to 53 students, which was just about a quarter of the students. And then I'll just sort of quickly step through, and then I think both Sue and Javier, who works very closely with transportation, can elaborate or answer questions. But as of July 30th, the transportation team closed the routes to any new rider requests because they need to work their routes and logistics and get that settled. And so since the lottery offers were still kind of being made, like we've mentioned, this has kind of happened on a continuous basis through the summer, we kept growing a waiting list of students that were wanting transportation. And so as of just a couple weeks ago, I don't even have any idea what date we're on, a week ago, we've offered transportation to 13 of the 24 who were still on the waiting list when we started school. And so 3 didn't get the transportation because they just are considered within walking distance. And then 8 were denied because the routes are too tight and we didn't have enough bus aides or drivers. So you kind of see the summary here at the end that we're routed to pick up 57 students, which is just over 25% of our pre-K students that are on buses. I do have a second slide here on, let me just do this one and then go back, and then we can look at both of them, Sue and Javier, in terms of where questions might come in. But in terms of getting kind of true access to all families who need transportation, there is still some barriers that we're going to continue to work on. I think first, the complexity with the routes is real. It's not as simple and basic as, these kids go to this school, and so now we just add on pre-K kids to the bus because we've got kids. We don't have classes for all kids in the neighborhood schools. So it's a whole other set of variables that they have to work through in terms of their routes. We don't yet have the ability to place all students in their neighborhood schools. And so right now what's happening is families who can transport their own kids end up with access to more pre-K locations, and that becomes a factor in the sort of wait list. If we are full, let's say in the placement where you can get to or could be transported to, and you can't transport your own kid, then you just don't have a seat. Whereas another family might say, okay, well, I could drive them to this other location, which gives them sort of that additional access to a seat in terms of how the process goes. And then I think another issue was that this last time we weren't clear so a challenge for us in general is when we start and initiate the lottery, we're putting out the information we have at that time, which is, we're backward mapping translations and all that. So it's, mid-year basically that we're committing to what the offering is, but typically we're still working on whatever expansions or evolutions we're committed to in that year. So there's some trick in terms of we can't really say or guarantee everything at the time that we're saying to families apply for the lottery. So that was the case with transportation. So that became tricky for some families where it's like, we think we can have transportation, but we can't yet guarantee it. So that becomes a barrier for some families that need to have an absolute guarantee that they'll be able to get transported. If that makes sense. So those are the two kind of big updates in terms of where we're at with offering transportation and some of the issues that we're still trying to work through to make this a truly fully meaningful barrier removal for families in terms of universal access. So Sue and Javier, anything else you'd want to chime in on with that?
I just think the thing to understand is right now transportation is offered to your neighborhood school. So if you happen to be in a neighborhood school where the number of people who would like to attend pre-K, for example, at Rowe, if there are more than 32 families who want to attend pre-K at Rowe, And there are many, many more that want to attend pre-K than there are slots. If you need transportation, you essentially can be on a wait list indefinitely unless someone moves out of their own neighborhood and you're relotteried. If you do not need transportation, you can go anywhere, right? So to Malia's point of you have a better, so transportation did provide removal of barrier in some instances, but it also put up a barrier in some other instances. Just in the reality, and you'll see when we get to the data, the wait list, right now is largely East End, low-income families, and because there are no slots at East End and they need transportation, they can't go anywhere else, right? So they will remain on the wait list indefinitely until we can problem solve for that transportation challenge. I think, in our lottery this past year, we asked the question, if we could offer transportation, would you want it? Because that was the best question we could ask because we couldn't guarantee it. People interpreted that in different ways. And so I think, what's on the table moving forward is a refinement of whatever questions we're going to ask based on what transportation believes they'll be able to offer for next year.
So I have a comment and two questions. One, the comment just that, I want to commend transportation for the ability to provide this level of access at a time when, there's a huge challenge in transportation, period. As many of you know, we're not able to transport our middle school students to athletic events. So in spite of all of that, I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost, that these folks worked to figure out how to provide a service that we weren't provided before. And, clearly it's not perfect.
And I'll add.
Can I finish, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to add something else positive.
Yeah. So then I just want to ask a question about the 61. Is that 61 is the number of people and 53 is or 57 is a subset of 61, or is that a number that has changed over time? 61 in the beginning and then it's a different number overall.
Mm-hmm. I believe it's the same, but we'd need to confirm with Dina. And I think, the issue is if a family says, yes, I want transportation, but for example, they live in the Ocean Avenue on Peninsula neighborhood, they can get transportation to the partner sites. So if they don't get a slot at one of the partner sites and they need transportation, they can't accept a slot, right?
And I could actually clarify. So the first number, Javier, is that was that initial window, right? So that was the families that initially applied on their application. 61 said they would want transportation. And then the next 53 is after we made those offers to slots, the sort of action, because you see 245 as more slots than we have, right? So that's what you're looking at, is that initial wave that applied. That's how many expressed interest in their application, but 53 is like what actually happened with the once placements were made, that initial wave.
But I guess that was my question, was 61 the larger universe? Because if that's the case, then we're serving a very significant percentage of the people that said that they wanted transportation.
Yeah. Well, that was from the first window. So I think that would be something maybe we could clarify, because then further down, since that original window, we've added 24 more students to those that wanted it. So I think we'd have to go 61 and 24. I think we'd be looking at 85 is my interpretation, but we can confirm that.
So that's still, we're serving 75% of the people that said that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I don't remember what my other, I don't remember what my other question was. So sorry.
Okay.
And I'll just add, as Dina and I were talking about this initially, about a quarter of families wanted transportation, and we are now providing transportation to 26%, right? So we're on track for meeting about the need that was initially asked for, if that makes sense. And the positive I was going to add, Javier, yes, kudos to transportation. It's very complex because as we add new students late once their routes are already done, they have to add that complexity of how they figure out how to provide transportation to a newly added student. And I was going to say also that they, again, kudos to Eric and to you, Javier, from last year around planning for this and having safety restraints, which is the gold standard, right? So where it says, not having bus aids, we have bus aids and safety restraints, which makes me feel very confident about transportation for all 4-year-olds, right? Even 4-year-olds who have never set foot on a bus before.
Great. So from committee members, any other questions here before we move into the before and after care context? Okay. Great. So then let me move us to before and after care. So that was the second big barrier that was illuminated in the DIP data, and that we were saying over the course of 5 years we wanted to address. And so, at this point we are not, I think you all know, offering before and after care. We did take an initial step, which was to extend the length of the day to mirror the school schedule. So my understanding from talking with folks in the state is that that's not a given. I think a lot of districts do partial days. And so that was a move toward trying to have something a little bit more lined up with what the K-5 kids have, and to extend the day a little bit. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for many working families, but that was a step toward having a longer day for kids. And so in terms of the sort of families with kids on different schedules, I feel like we've already addressed that. So that was just kind of a call to that, because that had an impact here. We started to look into how we could provide before and after care. So we have been looking at 3 potential pathways for how we could go about doing this. The first and kind of most obvious is to explore partnering with PreK to just add pre-K, because I think, as you all know, we have PreK in our buildings doing before and after care for K-5. So that's kind of exploration pathway 1. The second is to initiate a new partnership with a community partner to offer before and after care in our buildings, as well as we looked at bringing kids to another site to offer before and after care at other sites. And so there's sort of this whole category of new partnerships who could facilitate this. And then the third pathway we started to look into is to build and run our own before and after care program. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about where we are and what we've learned about those potential pathways at this point. So pathway 1, looking to partner with PreK to expand what they already do in our schools to an offering for students who are in pre-K. So a few things to note there. Like I mentioned, they're already doing before and after in our schools. This would require them obviously being interested in wanting to do this. I think our initial attempts to explore this with them illuminated they have a lot of questions and challenges. So there definitely was not initial, it wasn't like a given, it was more concerns and definitely not a given right away that this could happen. It's important to note that currently, although Sue points out to me, that's not a given that this is forever, but currently they are grandfathered in on the DHHS licensing requirements, which is significant because in the next 2 pathways, you'll see that's actually a pretty complex barrier in that DHHS and DOE have different licensing requirements. And so to run a before and after childcare program, you have to have the DHHS licensing requirements, childcare licensing. A lot of that overlaps, but not all of it. And regardless, at this point, they're saying you have to go through all of the steps to get childcare license. So right now, PreK is grandfathered and wouldn't have to do that. For PreK, they'd have to, in order to do this, it's not as basic as okay, great, we just take more kids. They would have to do some program changes and staffing ads, in particular to be responsive to the different developmental needs and differences of the youngest students. And then they do have a limited sliding scale model. So I think at this point now, we would need to check this. So this is not sort of today's data, but there's just questions about if all families who qualify would get access to a subsidized rate. I think that was a little bit more opaque in terms of how they went about that. And I think they had some some limitations there, but that would be more of a question to unpack that with them. And then they don't, and this is true for our K through 5, they don't have a lot of the other supports baked in. And so there's sometimes some challenges with who can access the before and after, because they don't have, the additional supports, of course, that we would have during the school day, like special education support and language support. So I think that's kind of where we are right now. We have not picked up that conversation with them this fall yet. That was going to be a big focus. And then we're going to talk about our goals for this year, because I think with Sue's transition, that definitely has big implications as to what we feel positioned to do right now. So this is sort of a summary of where we were last year, and we started to try to understand if we could go in this direction with REC. Anything, Sue or Javier, you'd want to add on the REC point before I go to new partnerships?
I agree that
everybody.
Oh, go ahead, Javier.
No, go ahead. So sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree that it's, when I met with them to start an initial conversation, there was different leadership. So, there's been transition there. I know that one of the other concerns they surfaced was just space, that if they wanted to have separate space for 4-year-olds and not have 4-year-olds with like 4th and 5th graders, that space in our buildings is sometimes challenging. So I think that would just be something else that would need to be navigated/negotiated.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say is that the added challenge at this point is that they're, significantly understaffed and have a very significant waiting list for their school age program. So this would be a very difficult time for them to actually envision a expansion to also, leave alone sort of the bureaucratic hurdles. Just the straightforward staffing hurdle at this point is fairly overwhelming.
Yeah, those are great ads. Thank you. And so then the second pathway that we've began to explore last year is whether or not we could find new community partners. So we look both to come into the building and to could there ever be a world where we brought kids off-site to another location. And we got furthest with LearningWorks. We actually drafted up a whole pilot with a financial model. Ultimately, that didn't get going. I think some of the key challenges, and once again, so you can elaborate further, but the childcare licensing issue was big and real. The cost to pull it off, it was pretty expensive to do this model in this way. And then just the pilot, maybe you can tell a little bit more about the scope of it, Sue, but their capacity to implement what we had tried to design with them at scale seemed very challenging, both from an implementation perspective, but then from a cost perspective as well. So Sue, why don't you add more to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is if a partner runs before and after school for us, who owns the before and after school? Do we own it or do they own it? So are they guests in our buildings and they're just staffing it, or are they running it? And with the pilot with LearningWorks was going to run it, which is why we decided to try just a one site pilot, and it would have required them to get childcare licensed, and it would have required them to have administration and do the hiring and do the sliding scale and do all of it, so we got pretty deep into it with the cost model. As Malia said, it got expensive because we wanted to honor that this, in terms of barrier removal, we want to provide this to the families furthest from opportunity, right? And so it costs money to run this and to have staff. But if we're not getting significant money from families, it runs at a big deficit. And so that was a disincentive for partner site programs. And then to think about scaling it in multiple buildings with having to get childcare licensed and similarly staffed in all of our different locations was just another conversation that we didn't get to because we never even launched the one classroom pilot. But we did a lot of exploration, and it was actually very beneficial. It was in the time that Miranda Fazula was the finance director. So it was really helpful to work both with the partner agency and our finance director to kind of model it out.
Yeah. And then I'll just look at pathway 3, and then we can take some questions on this. But pathway 3 is this idea that we'd build and run our own childcare program. So before and after care. So I think, Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, when we talked with folks at the state last week, we asked, is anybody else running their own before and after care program for pre-K? And I don't think they could name.
Yeah, the public school districts are not. People that are in collaboration with Head Start are running it in collaboration with Head Starts.
Yeah. So same issue here for us. We'd have to get childcare licensing at all of our locations where we'd offer this. Sue and I just had a great conversation with folks from the state to talk about this. And, I was like, well, how, I'd have to go through legislature and all this stuff. And so we tried to talk about ways that maybe we could get around that. And there's some follow-up conversations we're going to have. But that's currently a big issue. There's the payment model and infrastructure. So we need to come up with a sliding scale, have a way where we vet financials, collect payment, have all of that as a sort of function that we would build internally. And then connected to that from a staffing perspective, we'd need a program director to oversee the model, the budget, the payment, supplies, staffing, site administration, enrollment, et cetera. We'd have to figure out on-site administration because principals wouldn't necessarily have to be on-site in the schools from when before care starts to when it's done. So there needs to be on-site administration. We'd need to have both financial and HR capacity.
Did we lose Malia or just me?
I'm still here, so it might have been Malia.
I think it's Malia.
Okay.
We are here.
Finish her thoughts.
I will try. But the presentation went away. That's even harder. I have it though. Hold on. Let me just get to that slide. Okay.
Hello.
So yeah, so on-site administration she was talking about. Are you back? Okay. And then
was that just me or
that was just you. I was trying to be you, but you're back, so you can go ahead and be you. Are you frozen again?
No,
you're not.
Hey everyone, sorry. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
That was weird. It seemed like somebody came and took control of my computer. A little freaked out. Were you continuing on, Sue, or should I?
I was going to, but when you went, the slides went too. So you're on finance capacity and HR capacity, just meaning.
Gotcha. And then we would need to have on-site staff, obviously, to watch the kids and an ability to manage subs. We need to have a 10-to-1 ratio. And so once we tip over that, you have to add staff. That was part of what made things tricky when we were looking at the model with LearningWorks. We had talked about, could we ever do like differentiated scale schedules for ed techs if we were trying to hire ed techs? And so that would have an impact on their school day staffing model and all the implications for that, and we'd have to negotiate that. So those are some of the things that we've looked at. And I think just in general, childcare is not our core competency, right? We run school. We're not a childcare organization, so I think that's a significant thing for us to consider if we were to ever want to pursue Pathway 3. As you can see, we'd have to build out an entire childcare program, which is not really what we do.
And I'll just add super concrete example in the partner sites that provide before and after school. When we're in public pre-K, we're in a required 1-to-8 adult to child ratio. And then before and after school, because it's under DHHS licensing, they can do 1-to-10. But they can only have up to 10 students in their before and after care classroom, because once they get to 11, they have to hire a second person, right? So it becomes cost ineffective. So it's very challenging even for the partner sites who are used to doing this routinely, because the majority of their clientele have working families that need full day of care. Yeah. And again, Matt and Katie can speak a lot more widely to that around what it looks like in the community. I know deeply what it looks like in our current partner sites. But to Roberto's Javier's staffing issue with REC, staffing with childcare programs, I'm sure you've all been seeing in the paper, is at crisis level nationally and also locally. So similar challenges.
I have a question here on the licensing. What do you mean about the GHS licensing is different than the DOA? The DOE licensing is just for the childcare, or?
So DOE Chapter 124 is what is required for public pre-K, so pre-K programs in public schools.
Mm-hmm.
And to run before and after school in the same exact building, same exact classroom with the same exact staff, we would still need to get Department of Health and Human Services childcare licensing.
Mm.
And so Javier and I have met with people from the state. I have given testimony to the state when they did childcare licensing revisions to beg them to reconsider, because it makes no sense that you are in the same building with the same people and you need a different licensing structure. It's just, and so to Malia's point of when we met with the DOE last week, they were very clear that this is an issue, but it's also it's a substantive legislative process. And so it will take a long time if it's going to be changed legislatively to get changed.
Mm-hmm.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah, it really is. So I imagine. For the partnership, we talk about the childcare, but I saw we have a partners, and then I see the REC is an issue also. So did we already look at around to see the private childcare? Then we can partner with in the town.
When I did an exploration 2 years ago, any of the programs that provide care for children full day already were at capacity. So there was no location in which we could, for example, provide transportation at the end of a pre-K day and send children to another program because they're already full. That's the challenge. Whether that's still the case now in a pandemic context may not be. It may be that some of these childcare programs that are struggling need children, but they also need children because they can't get the staff to keep all their classrooms open. So even one of our partner sites has closed 2 classrooms because they cannot staff the classrooms. So when I say, there's a crisis, it's definitely a crisis.
I wonder if Katie or Matt, if you can add any context to that, just from your experience in the sort of the broader, ecosystem.
I'm happy to jump in. Hi, everybody, and Katie, feel free to add on. I would say, ditto to everything Sue is saying about the overall challenges. Staffing is going to continue to be a big limiting factor, but if we're taking the long view of sort of addressing these barriers over the years of expansion, I would just highlight that the analysis that we're doing right now with Data Innovation Project is a way to kind of zoom out a little bit and try to address the barriers families are experiencing as they describe them. So there may be some opportunities, for example, with location of expansion classrooms with particular partners that may be able to bring some before and after capacity that we may be able to plan for to help alleviate some of this need. We won't know entirely until we see that analysis, but I think that gives us the opportunity to think from a higher elevation about what families are lacking or what's getting in their way of their children participating. And then obviously there are still all the challenges that Sue has described, but we also are, at a moment where there are community organizations that are having to rethink their business models. And so there are no guarantees, but I think it is a good moment to be sort of opening up this question again and looking anew at who might be available and interested in partnering.
Thank you. I am going to move us on. We have about 15 more minutes. Is there any other questions on before and after care? Okay. So I'm going to kind of try to fly us through these other updates around lottery process, mixed delivery, contract, and program quality. So I'll kind of step us through this, and then at the end, maybe see if there's questions across the board just to make sure we get time. So the first update we wanted to do is just around lottery process. So in terms of what we've been focused on, the first is just cohesion and coordination. So, Sue shouted out Dina's work earlier. By having her focused on this, we have the ability to manage the lottery process, data inquiries, and internal coordination in a much more streamlined and cohesive way than we've ever been able to do. In terms of recruitment, we've increased outreach with a very particular focus on reaching out to multilingual families and communities as kind of where we've emphasized our new efforts. We did extend the lottery window, so I think we'll talk about in a little bit. We're still questioning that timeline and if that works for people, but that happened. Sue mentioned that the data we now have is new, so thanks to Dina, we are able to have the kind of data that we talked about and can provide that to DIP for the deeper analysis that they're going to be doing for us. This is just knowing in terms of the lottery, we've continued to adhere to the 55-45 FRL balance, and we'll talk in a second here about some questions we have about this. And then we've also really focused under Sue's leadership in this lottery process on doing everything we can to proactively identify students who have support needs, so that we're planning strategically and carefully in advance to set students and classrooms up for success on the first day of school. So those are some of the process updates that we've been focused on. And then in terms of the lottery, some of the things that we're grappling with, and I think Matt or Adam, you said, hey, if you guys have a focus group on this, I'd be happy to be a part of it. I do think there are a set of questions we have around the lottery. Here's some of them. I think timeline, like we've mentioned, is the first. So families who qualify for free and reduced lunch and multilingual families are overrepresented in our wait list later on in the process. So we have concerns and questions about that and wonder about whether or not we need to make adjustments to our timeline. Connected to that, there's a timing issue for students who are experiencing homelessness because it's not like kindergarten where like we'll find you a seat no matter what. With the limited number of seats, if we have students, generally these students come in later, and so we don't always have spots for them, and definitely would want to prioritize a pre-K seat for students who are qualified under McKinney-Vento. We know there's an issue with families who prefer a different location than the one we're able to give them, and so there's been a lot of tension with families around them wanting to hold the slot they have but remain on the wait list. And right now our process is that once you have a slot, then we take you off the list. So there's just tension around that in terms of the choices we make right now in our process. I had mentioned before that the work we're doing to expand seats and or remove barriers happens concurrent with the application process. So it just creates some complexity for us and families in so much as we can't always commit super clearly around exactly what we're offering when we open up the lottery process. So we're cognizant of the fact that that's not optimal. And then I think we have questions when we look at the way the demographic balance plays out, in which classes can get filled right away and which ones can't. I think the team has asked questions about, do we want to maintain that exact balance in every class? Do we want to think of it more at a school level or at a district level? And so that's surfaced as a wondering as we look at continually refining the lottery process to really be responsive to the needs of our community. Anything on lottery you would add, Sue?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. I'll go through the other couple things and then just come back and say sort of overall of these updates, where do folks have questions or comments? The next update is just around the mixed delivery model. So when I say that, what I mean is the fact that we have classes in our buildings and then classes in community partner sites. So I think, we continue to see the benefits of the opportunities in this model. It promotes a citywide model that really creates sustainability for the partners in the community, which matters a lot, especially when we look at the early childcare needs of our families and community. It helps us continue with expansion even when we don't have space in our buildings. That was very much the case this last year and will be this year as well. Our partners do have the before and after care opportunities for our families, and we just talked about how that's very much needed and appealing to many families. And then for families that are in the partners starting with early childcare, it just gives them the option of having that consistent care from infancy through pre-K. And then on the flip side, there are a lot of challenges too with managing a mixed delivery model. I think that there's schedule sort of complexities with lining things up with our schools and our buses, transportation, and figuring that out and the complexity of that for our transportation team. Some differences in the program offerings in terms of what we have in our buildings as compared to what we have in the sites, specials being a good concrete example. And then just a million sort of issues with what I'm calling protocols. And I think snow days is like a simple one where partner sites might stay open when we close, and then we run into the whole issue with the contract and our teachers who are supposed to not have to come in per what all the other teachers are doing, but the partner site tries to stay open. So there's just like at every turn, small details like that just create a lot of management challenge in terms of having both these kind of models working together. Anything you want to add to that, Sue?
Just that, I've been trying to diligently survey the teachers that are housed in the partner sites to get their particular perspectives. And I think it's worth revisiting that as, the district continues to think about partnering and what the role looks like, because both the directors and the people that are living the experience in those buildings have particular contexts where we probably make some assumptions they're living it.
Yeah. And then we wanted to give a quick update on the contract implications as well. I know that, for those of you who were around at the time, this was a huge deal when the board made this move to shift the partner site teachers onto the contract. And so I have to admit at the time, I had no idea all of the implications that would come with that in terms of especially just the management complexity related to that. So right now, what that's meant is that whereas in the past we had community partners who essentially kind of ran the pre-K program, and then we would meet with them to just align, they did have to do a few things like adopt the same curriculum we were using per Chapter 124, requiring an evidence-based curriculum. But really, they ran their pre-K class the way they run their other classes. What's happening now is that since the teachers are on our contract, our pre-K director, Sue, has been the hiring manager. So she runs all the hiring. She does the supervision and evaluation. They've now asked for us to provide substitutes, and Sue helps facilitate managing subs when people are out. There's just new expectations for partners in terms of sticking to the hours and the prep time that our teachers are allowed through our contract that are not necessarily a part of the culture and rhythm in the partner programs. We're outfitting those classes fully with curriculum materials. District protocols have to be consistent, especially as it pertains to our teachers' experience. So COVID MOU obviously was a huge, huge deal in terms of how to execute that in the partner sites and facilitate that, and the tons of capacity that took to facilitate the implementation of that and all these other sites that weren't kind of part of our daily team, and then just all the real-time problem solving. So that, I just want to share and be transparent about, hold on, I'm sorry, I'm going to cough. That I didn't have enough. Turns out I needed another seltzer. That is a lot. I knew that we were kind of, that going into this was a challenge for our partners because for them, it created a lot of complexity with the pay parity issue internally. What I didn't fully appreciate at the time was how much that meant, how much additional work we were taking on for our director. So it just comes up as we continue to expand and think about the capacity needed to run this. We're also looking at whether or not the partners and our union would be open to some kind of different ways of thinking about this, and some flexible ways of thinking about this. But as it stands right now, what ends up happening is Sue's kind of like the supervisor and hiring manager for all of these teachers across all of these sites, and then kind of liaising with the directors on that. So that's proven pretty management intensive, if you will. What would you say to clarify what I said, Sue, or add to it? Anything on that?
I think that clarifies. I mean, I think it's, as you said, when we were partnering with programs and the teachers were the employees of the program ran the classroom, right? And so now that we've put them on our contract, it affords us different things. So like the pre-K teachers come to regular pre-K professional development with the entire district pre-K team, right? So they're authentically part of the pre-K district team, which is great. They can attend staff meetings at their partner site schools. So like our partner sites in town go to Reiki for, to be part of our Portland Public Schools community. But then we have the flip side of all the challenges, like there are no music, art, and gym in partner sites. So we have a contractual issue around specials time and, around planning time. And as Malia said, COVID, the protocols and the health and safety measures and trying to ensure that students in those pre-K classrooms that we now own are getting the same health and safety implementation as our buildings has been very challenging. So like ordering air purifiers and, many, many details, like Malia said. And so, without getting deeply into the weeds, I said to Malia, I want to go on record that I fully support a mixed delivery model. I think the community partner sites are very valuable. I think the model that we have right now makes it challenging, right? So we are all in this universe for better pay for all preschool teachers, educators. And so I think that the intention was to put everyone on the contract so that there was pay parity. But I think all of these unintended negative consequences have created almost like a need for a mini principal for the partner sites, right? Which is kind of what I've been doing in addition to the other things that I've had on my plate.
Yeah. And so I'm going to keep us moving in terms of these final updates, just looking at our time. So that's that. And then the next is just around program quality. So just in terms of what we're using, we have the PreK for Me curriculum. Sue has facilitated collaboration with Tracy Zager, who's the coach who coaches our math coaches, so that our pre-K teachers are getting professional development that is aligned with our problem-based curriculum approach in K through 5. So that's been really awesome, exciting work. And we've got teacher leaders helping in that regard. We use the second step curriculum, which we use in K through 5 at pre-K. Sue's been partnering closely with the curriculum team to ensure coherence with the K through 5 continuum, especially as we look at the work that's happening around science, social studies, outdoor learning, and tech integration. We've made a shift to have the Dial 4 screener. It was for many years that all schools kind of did different things. And so she's facilitated a transition to a consistent screener. We did the speed, I think, this year, right, Sue, with COVID, but our kind of agreement is that we're moving toward the Dial 4 across all of our sites. We're using Teaching Strategies Gold to collect authentic assessment data on how students are doing relative to the early childhood standards. And then I'll let Sue talk a little bit about what we aspire to in terms of the class, which I'll kick it to you in just a second. I also just want to highlight just teacher support. Sue does do work with, we have, because of expansion, also turnover, lots of onboarding that happens every year. So she's helping to support that. And then we have pre-K specific PD, as well as integrating our pre-K teachers in the school communities, both those who are housed there, but also in partner sites, like she just mentioned in the Reiki example. And then our big focus from a program perspective over the last 2 years has been the COVID implications. That has really consumed all of our time, attention, energy in terms of how to facilitate the transition to hybrid learning and facilitate health and safety protocols in a pre-K context. So we've continued to have these other pieces in place, and there's been training and support, but I think our hope and vision for what we'd like to do around program quality is not something we've realized yet, given the fact that we've been managing through COVID while still pursuing those other goals around expansion, transportation, et cetera. Sue, can you speak a little bit to the class and what we hope to do with that, and then anything else that I missed here on program quality?
Sure. So my hope last year was, the class is essentially a classroom observation that's looking at different quality indicators in a classroom, not the least of which is adult-child interactions, which are, highly researched indicator of outcomes for students. And so the plan was to have a class observation in each classroom and some coaching and feedback that was individualized to get people to the next level. But of course, the pandemic did not allow for that. So that moved to an online platform, which is not the same, of course. So I just name it as a future goal because there is a need for sure. And when I was part of early reading for first projects, we used the class as well. The state and many Head Start programs use it for looking at program quality. So, one of the ways to look at outcomes is Teaching Strategies goal to see our students achieving in all domains of development against widely held expectations for 4-year-olds. So that's a student achievement, but the class also looks at different dimensions of the teacher practice. And so, again, future goal.
So I'm going to just quickly look at next steps. Let me do that, and then I'll kind of take us out of the presentation and see from that kind of update section what sparked for you as far as questions or anything else. But in terms of our annual goals for this year, fully support Sue's decision to go on leave and definitely appreciate her decision. Know that was extremely hard for her. She's extraordinarily committed and is continuing to operate as though she's here to the very last second and beyond. And so Sue is just hugely passionate about this work and takes all of it as seriously as anyone could ever. So we are definitely sad, but not in a way where we're trying to make Sue feel guilty. I feel just a huge amount of admiration for her courage to make this ultimate decision at this point. But it does mean for us that obviously the first big goal for this year is to find her successor for the pre-K director position. So that's the immediate focus. We're going to continue to refine our transportation access. Like I mentioned, our team's been doing amazing work. And so we're going to, I know Javier and the team there is going to keep looking at how to just build on all the successes and sort of deal with some of the challenges that we face to the extent it's within our control at this point. Like I mentioned, we've been looking at a lot of this lottery stuff. So that's a focus for this year. How do we continue to refine the process based on all this data Dina's collected and what we're learning from it? There's, I think at this point that we're still imagining pursuing expansion with the caveat that we really want to get the data from DIP and understand the ready partners and what it will take to do that. So with Sue's transition, I still have that as something on my plan that I'd be pursuing and really leaning heavily on starting strong as a partner to help us look at what's possible there. But I think, I'll have to work with you, Javier, to work with the board just based on what we're learning about that to see how feasible that is. I think we want to get more focused on program quality and support. I think because of everything that we've been trying to pull off along with COVID, that just like the level of coaching, new teacher onboarding, training, et cetera, that we want to do and feel committed to has not been possible yet. So that's something we want to be structured to be able to focus on much more than we are right now. And so I think that's like a question, what's feasible in the near term and long term. And then at this point, I'm recommending and have talked with Javier about pausing on trying to fully pull off the addition of before and after care for next fall, just given the transition, given how huge that project is, given the fact that we're still in COVID, given all this stuff around the DHHS rules that we're trying to sort out. So I think we would continue to do that kind of work in terms of conversations with Starting Strong and what they can think about within the broader community. I think we'd still be having conversations with REC to see with changing leadership where they're at. And if there's some obvious opportunities, we'd jump at them. But as far as having a commitment that we think we can fully model this and pull it off and have it implemented, I don't think that's really feasible right now at this point. So I'll say that, and then Javier, feel free to say anything else if you want to on that. Okay. So I think that's kind of what we're focused on this year. So I think that brings us to the end, and I'm going to stop screen share. And we're actually over time. I apologize. It's a lot. There's been a lot going on. So I will defer to you, Adam, as the chair of the committee in terms of if you want to take a little bit of time for questions or what you want to do next.
I would love for you to reground like the purpose of the conversation tonight and what's next steps to help understand, if there's a conversation that needs to happen in a timely manner tonight, or if this is more just a preview for further conversation and time to dig in with the full board, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I just put the kind of session aims back into our chat just for visibility. So our goal tonight was to give an update on our progress against our 5-year goals per the resolution, to illuminate for you all some of the challenges and barriers we face as we try to pursue full implementation of what that resolution calls for, and then to answer questions. So, we weren't intending to make decisions in this conversation. I think we just felt from a managing up perspective, it was time for us to come to you with some information update as to where we stand relative to what we're trying to pull off. So I feel like I would ask you, I think we mostly accomplished that objective. But yeah, definitely open for if there's other things folks wanted to discuss that we could do at a follow-up meeting or whatnot.
Yeah, so I think that's the right place to go. Understanding that this is Sue's last night with us before leave, that we would definitely want to reflect and honor her and all that she's done. Is there something that feels hot from the committee that you just want to elevate for further focus conversation? And not necessarily to open it all up tonight, but just to make it clear that to myself and Malia that we'll need to spend more time with some component that we heard about tonight in the future.
Can I just real quick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think I really want us to dig, particularly with the rest of the board members, about what the implications were of having the contract requirement. I mean, all of this information, clearly the entire board needs to hear, but I think that's a really interesting discussion, just because, as Sue said, we're all invested in some kind of form of wage equity, but given the barriers that are presented. So I think that to me stood out, not any more than other ones, but it's a unique one. And just to underscore, as Sue said, given the amount of data that we have now and reflecting on that late night when the resolution was passed, the value of having information and to keep it. So I think we're in a good place in terms of what we have now to make decisions for the future. And a lot of that, I'm grateful to say that it was Sue's foundational work to get us here. So as you step down, and like you said, rightly so, to credit you for everything, to putting us where we are today. This is a long place away from that night where that resolution was passed.
Thank you.
And
as I said, it's been a great opportunity, and I've learned so much, and there's a lot of the work that I'm very committed to. It's just really big. But thank you too.
Can I just echo something, Adam, please?
Please.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you for the commitment. Thank you for the passion and everything you have put there. And I think, like Roberto just mentioned, when we get information, that's why we really open up eyes to see the challenge and the issues. And I think we learning also about the burnout from only one person, like a director and coordination. And I think we really need to see when we're moving forward, like I see, then we can hire 0.5 PT to assist for the lottery process. So I think just to make sure then, the director of PreK has some help on the side, try to help some of the burnout carry on one person responsibilities to go over everything that Sue has done. So I think, and I would like to really go into the next steps. with the full board, really to recognize, especially for the before and after school, because this is the one really bringing families, getting the parents to be able to afford their living and go to work. So if we're making impose or something differently, is something that we may see the drop of the participation for some of the families. So it's something that I just want for the whole board to go to the discussion and to see so how we can come up with some other different steps to move forward, because it's really changing the foundation for a lot of families. And when we see what the pandemic has really brought as a loss of the learning process, and some of those aspects of the pre-K since we start a couple of years ago, and I really kind of little wonder about the 44 seats remaining to achieve our goal. If it's really in jeopardy, are we gonna be able to pull up some seat next year? So there's a lot of questions in my mind right now with all those challenges and issues I just heard. So thank you, and good luck to you for your next step.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You'll be missed. Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I'll just close out our little committee comment here and saying that it's clear to me that we've done a tremendous amount of work and kind of are at our growth edge of what we're able to do in actualizing the Portland Promise without having the coordination, collaboration of other levels of government. Shelley Pingree's office put out a graphic that showed how little the United States invests in childcare specifically per child in the United States compared to other wealthy countries, and it's like $500 per kid compared to thousands of dollars per kid in other. And so I'm just seeing that come home to roost in some of what we're dealing with here, and the fact that just this past year was 1.5 FTEs in our central office team, if you will, between Sue, you, and Dina to administer this program, of course, with the support of the rest of the central office. And tonight, our silent but powerful partners of Matt and Katie and others who I know will help make all this go. But you have really pushed a rock up a mountain, and I know your passion and commitment is there, and totally honor you for doing what you need to do, because it's got to take care. So thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So with that said, Millie, I think you have the notes in terms of really digging into the contract piece, and just this update is something the whole board should be appraised of and brought through at some point in whatever way you and Javier and Emily deem appropriate and such. But
can I say one last thing on that? I think in what I would suggest is I will get really clear on the timeline, but I think that might be a good point to bring it to the full board, and we could connect Adam about whether or not there's an opportunity to run it through committee first or how to do that. But I think once we have that will be definitely a great point to add to what we did tonight and give that full perspective. So it's just my thought on where we might go next with this.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. And I just also want to say thanks to Sue. She's done the grind. It's her heart, soul, mind, physical self behind this. So I feel super proud of where we are and what we're poised to do next. So I just wanted to echo that as well in terms of what I get to see day to day.
Thank you.
What it takes. And I'm also totally freaked out. So hopefully y'all are compassionate and empathetic.
Yeah, and I'll say just shout out to Matt and Katie too, because they've been super supportive and helpful, and they have the pulse of the larger community. So I think leaning on them as much as they'll let you is really wise. And thanks to all of you for your support. And like I said, it's a leave. I'm not going into the witness protection program or moving to Siberia. I'll be around, and I may be back. So thanks for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Sue. Thanks, everybody.
So with that, I think we're at is there a motion to adjourn? All right. First, Nikki, second, Roberto, and we're adjourned. Thanks. So, and hi, Katie.